Yeah,
Uh,
it solves a bunch of different problems, right? Because it like the freedom of expression kind of deal. Well, not freedom, but the freedom to
the
express
First
yourself, right?
Amendment in fighting
Yeah.
games. Yes,
I wonder why that's on my head lately.
yes.
But
The
like,
right to swag.
hello, and welcome to the Absolute Guard podcast. This is Absolute Extras number 3. I've got Tanner, aka King Hippo, on the call with me. How's it going, man?
Oh my god, it's so good. Try not to be boorish because I'm here for 4ish. This is the fourth time I've been here, and hopefully, I don't get boring anymore. So let's keep rolling. Let's go.
Cheers. This is an absolute extra. This is where we talk about anything that's outside of the ordinary for the Absolute Guard podcast regular. That one, I think lately that one's been more community focused and like competition focused. And sometimes I really want to get deep into the nitty gritty of mechanics and game theory or game design and whatnot. And couldn't ask for a better partner in Tanner in
As
that
we all
conversation
do.
today.
As we all do. Yeah.
Some people do.
Some people.
I've
Yeah, that's
noticed
true.
that there's like some people just want to feel it out, and
Yeah.
I think that's perfectly fine too. It's taken me a long time to really come to terms with that because uh, when Street Fighter V came out, I am very much a mechanics guy, and I agreed with a lot of the mechanics that Street Fighter V had. But as far as the general consumer experience with the really poor launch and the characters, the graphics not looking up to par for a game releasing in that year, like it, there's a lot there where I conveniently ignored that. The lack of single player, another one. I conveniently ignored that, and I was like, fuck you, I got mine. And it's
Yeah. It's
taken me a
easy to
little
fall
while.
into that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's taken me a little while to realize that like uh, there's a lot more to a fighting game than just what I want. Because I saw it later on down the line in that Street Fighter V's poor reception translated to a less than stellar competitive experience for me. The game was supported less, the entrants were less, the general outlook of the game was pretty harsh, and so it I see a lot of opportunities for Street Fighter 6 to be what I wanted 5 to be, as far as like being mechanically what I want out of a game, but also it being well enough received on the single player and mechanics end, or even just like for other competitive players who didn't jive with 5, for them to come back and enjoy it with me, and we get to actually play the game for real together again.
Yeah, I think that's those are all great points. And I think although I don't disagree with your analysis there, I think the one thing I would say is that Street Fighter V will get its flowers. I believe it was the most entered Evo game at one point.
Mm-hmm.
It main evented almost every major uh, fighting game tournament that we have, and that is as the Street Fighter title it inherited. It kind of makes sense, although it would change spots at times, which is kind of unheard of. But I think and one of the reasons I wanted to talk today was because I do think that as and this is always like the rose. It's like what are the opposite of rose tinted glasses? It's like every time a new game comes out, the previous game was the shits. It was the
Yep.
worst. It was like the 1800s, horse shit everywhere. It was just we don't ever talk about it again. And then like 2 years later, it'll go back to the rose tinted glasses. But for right now, we've got the poo tinted glasses, and you're looking at Street Fighter V, and oh man, I can't believe like we even played that. But you did
Mm-hmm.
for like 7 years, so you must have liked something about it. And I think that goes into Street Fighter 6, which we'll be talking about, where I think that it is important to look at what Street Fighter 5 put on the table
Mm-hmm.
and what Street Fighter 6 kept from it and what it didn't, and what Street Fighter V's legacy ultimately will be, as was the case with Street Fighter 4 before it and Street Fighter 3 and all that stuff.
For sure. I think 5 in particular had a burden of not being 4 and being the first after the modern resurgence of Street Fighter. And so any new thing that they tried, if it was different than 4, then it had a little bit of extra scrutiny applied to it, I think. And I agree with you in that some of those things that they tried did stick, and then they stuck all the way into Street Fighter 6.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then other things. I actually I feel like a lot of my favorite things about 5 stuck in 6. Just
Mhm.
to get started with that is like
Yeah.
the crush counter system, specifically for
Yes.
punishing a dragon punch when you are put into a counter state after a counter hit state after whiffing a dragon punch.
And
Um,
by and with that, along with that, I think it's important also to mention, which in Street Fighter, I think even in Ultra they were still like that, and in Street Fighter 5 the first season, but we have moved into the era of only EX or in Street Fighter 6 case OD uh uppercuts have full body invulnerability. Like that
oh yeah,
era of non-metered uppercuts is gone, and I
yeah,
think that is that was a choice in 5 after the first season, and in 4 my guess is the feedback was obviously a lot of people didn't like how you could use an invulnerable move and then FADC it to be safe. So in
sure,
Ultra they made it so that you could at least punish it with like a jab or something, and then in 5 it was like you don't have FADC, so but then the characters that did have one were massively favored. I mean, Cammy, Ryu, Ken, all those characters, everyone was like, well, we want to play them because they've got invulnerable reversals that we can just do whatever.
sure,
And that one got a lot of controversy because you'll see some old heads will talk about how like, well, it's not even like it's a big deal that it reverses momentum. But I think, in an era where the reversal windows aren't tight like ST, where it's just like you have to be an insane person to be able to do it like regularly, consistently. Like that is a dedicated actual thing you have to learn. It's not like you can just learn to do it day one.
hmm
Where it is very easy to get those out in between block strings, and it is very easy to steal a lot of momentum back constantly back and forth. They decided that, hey, we need the window on these to be really wide open for punishment, which
right.
led to the punish counter, as you talked about.
Yeah, I think this is it's arrogant of me to say it like this, but I believe that where Dragon Punch is being in a counter hit state and um, being weakened overall as far as the invulnerability frames go and needing meter essentially. Um, that is a foregone conclusion in my opinion because the actual crux of that happening comes all the way back to the original desire to change to make inputs easier. The idea of making fighting games more accessible translates to more input shortcuts. All like starting with Third Strike, really, because I mean, other games had input shortcuts prior to that, but Third Strike I know has a lot of the traditional shortcuts, and then 4 added more. Added more. So essentially, then this thing that used to be rarely done and it used to be hard to do, as you mentioned,
Yeah,
suddenly became more commonplace, and so the entire game had to change around that.
it did. It
Um,
did. Yeah.
and so, like, I think only in late Street Fighter 4 did people really start looking at risk reward and balancing that around uppercuts. Because prior to that, it was just you can get this out, but part of the risk of the uppercut is not just that you might get baited; it's that you might not be able to do it. And so, the easier you make them to do, the lower you make that risk, and the more powerful that option gets.
Yeah, it was well, and then also it was like you'd have characters like Akuma, like Seth. I don't know if Evil Reuse was, but it was like they were multiple hit uppercuts that also you could visually see did it get blocked or did it not, and then FADC. Not
Right.
only were you still safe, but some of them you got a combo or an ultra after. Like Seth could always like it was 3 hit uppercut, and then he would FADC and then do his little toe taps on you
Sure.
and put you in a mix up situation. So these were, and if you look back at like ST and things like that, even now at a high level, people don't really like reversal between like block strings or
No,
like
not at
general
all.
pressure. It's mostly
Right.
for getting up and for anti-airing. Like people don't do it like well, and some people like it depends on the character. Like Ken,
Yeah, you'll
his
see
low
them poke
punch,
with it, right? Like
yeah,
if you
because
have
it's
your
really
backs to
good.
the corner, right?
Or
He'll poke.
Cammy,
Right.
yeah, Cammy's is really it's huge horizontal range, so you'd want to use it as a poke. But even then, it's like it's not the most threatening thing in the world. Whereas in 4, it was. In 4, it was Sagat in the first version where he had the damage that basically just didn't get fixed. But he would do a ton of life, and Ryu would do a ton of life. And so now the risk reward, like you said, was completely out of whack.
Yeah. It's you
And
have rock paper scissors, but then you add a shotgun on top of it too. Because seriously, the
rock,
only counter
yeah,
to it is blocking, right? But then you have the FADC system that can before Ultra even it gave you advantage, right? So like and again I didn't want to go too deep into to talking about 4, but
it's
specifically
important. It's context. It's context.
right. And I think that the reaction then for 5 was, all right, let's dial that back. Even in season 1, like the DPs were still invulnerable, and the EXDP thing came later. But the crush counter system did stay as far as
yes, that was from beginning.
I want to be clear. And when I say crush counter system, I want to talk about DPs only right now, because crush counter is a very wide, wide topic,
I mean,
right?
There were it wasn't perfect, but there was like
Yeah.
for the big thing was if you Dragon Punch specifically, or you do an invulnerable move specifically, you get crush counter punished for any reason, like with any move. Yeah.
Yep. And then the vast majority of characters that could FADC or V trigger cancel their uppercuts, even that was still unsafe, just not crush counterable.
Yes.
So they were able to illustrate like a gradient of risk reward, essentially.
Right. Like Ken could do uppercut into his FADC, but he was already punishable by the time it was coming at you. So it was like you couldn't do that and get something away with it.
Right.
Akuma, I don't believe could ever do that either. Like
Akuma could. Akuma, but he would.
Oh, that's right.
He'd be unsafe.
Yeah.
And what's cool is you could just mash it again and then get the big uppercut, because now it's V-trigger powered up V-trigger, so it's a hard knockdown.
Yeah, but I think it's a great point that like they decided that okay, well now people are mashing these out during blockchain, so they're a legitimate threat.
Mm-hmm.
That probably the risk reward of it. Now you could argue that the reward got toned down a lot for 5 because there are not a lot of characters that could do something other than like uppercut super or something, which is still damaging, but it's a high risk, high reward thing. I see that argument. I get it. But I also think that they really thought about it and decided, okay, we need not only to have it cost something to do this, and we also needed to make sure that it is a Hail Mary. It is not a regular move that you just do as like a riposte, just like a quick like tap and we're back to the new, because that's what it was in 4, and everybody complained about it in 4 that they were scared to do moves because someone could just match out an uppercut and it was probably safe.
Right.
And now we don't have that. And I think it was pretty good for the most part. Like, I think it worked pretty well. Obviously, the punish counter system, I think when it came to just like having the priority system on normals, I wasn't a big fan of, but I do like that it made these big Hail Mary reversals really something to think about. And now in 6, if we can jump to 6, it means it's now applied to everything. Everything has that risk reward, and a risk reward means that you can't just throw out this huge move, and if it misses and they tap you with a light kick or whatever, you just get the light kick or you just get the medium punch. Now it's like, well, now you actually get super duper frame advantage for doing that on any move, and you can basically make your own combo depending on the situation. Like we were talking about with Luke, that's a great example. Luke has standing medium punch, which in Street Fighter 5 is a great move. Even as a whiff punish, because he's got a decent target combo, which he keeps in 6. But now, even better, if he does standing medium punch and his punish counter, he can do his jab target combo afterwards.
Right.
Steal some damage, steal some momentum. And it's like, that's a really good, now it's like those moves like that, where it's like, well, it's a single hit poke. It's kind of whatever. They may take on a different meaning in 6, whereas in 5, they were just a good poke.
Right. I think that one of 5's main criticism is lack of depth as far as combo tree goes, like the different like routes you could go, different links you could do, what was cancelable, what wasn't.
It's a little samey sometimes. Yeah.
So the punish counter system essentially gives opportunity, and again, like the Street Fighter 5's attempt at rectifying that, or well, not really rectifying it, more like the way to counterbalance that was the crush counter system and the unique combos that come with that crush counter system.
But the unique to some people, yeah, like right. Some people can do the crush counter and it's like awesome, right? And then other characters, you're like me, like
right. So I'm thinking like the difference between a counter hit combo versus a crush counter combo. There is that like extra layer, but in practice, it ends up being pretty samey still. But the punish counter system, because of its nature and that it applies to any situation really, even for both whiff punishing and for punishing something, it creates a lot of additional freedoms. The criticism that I have though is that can actually be kind of overwhelming to a lot of players, in that now you have essentially 3 layers of combos that you have to learn. You have to learn a normal one, a counter hit one, and a punish counter one.
Yeah. Street Fighter 6 is going to be a game for the freaks. I'm sorry to say. Like I've heard James Chen talk about how he doesn't think frame data will be as important. Get out, James. I'm sorry. Like that's not this game. Street Fighter 5 could be that game. Street Fighter 5, I think, was samey enough at times where you could generally, and put with the priority thing, you could generally assume like yeah, I can't do much here, and it's pretty easy to feel out. But 6, it's like there's going to be a context to a lot of things, and that's kind of what what they say scares people away from like Tekken and stuff, where there's going to be a lot of like contextual
Oh, the
counter hit
legacy
only,
knowledge thing,
or
right?
like or knowing kind of like, okay, counter hit only string, like this only connects on counter hit.
Sure.
This has a different reaction on the counter hit that you can take advantage of. I actually don't think that's that intimidating. I think it's pretty easy to feel out, but I think when you have to experiment with it, like you said. So that can, and experimenting is scary.
I think, and I'm sure we'll end up talking about Drive Rush a little bit later, but the Drive Rush actually like acts as like a multiplier on the number of options that you have essentially, because now you have, Drive Rush punish counter, Drive Rush counter hit, Drive Rush
Yeah,
normal hit, and so it's like now you have 6 different combos. And now if you have
yes,
a route to burn your super meter, which is conveniently separate from your drive meter, you have
yeah.
another permutation there.
Or someone's in burnout, and then you do that, or you cancel a parry after an uppercut, and you're in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, and anything is possible. You have so much frame advantage, you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah,
That is a possibility. And while I do agree it can be intimidating, I think there's just some strict, and I always think like, and I'll tie it back to Virtua Fighter because I think highly of Virtua Fighter, even though it is considered inaccessible a lot of times. I think what makes it work is that there's some really hard and fast rules that it always plays by, and you can always count on those. They're hard rules; they always apply. And in
Mhm.
Street Fighter 6, I think one of them is that the frame advantage is pretty. It's set. Here's what you
It's
get on a
pretty
counter hit.
uniform.
Here's what you get on a punish counter. Here's what you get on a drive rush. Here's what you get in burnout. So you can just learn the values and kind of intuitively know, here's what I've got. Here's the situation, and I can work that into it. I think that's going to be a little bit less intimidating when you think of it that way. Although I agree there are a lot of routes, and there will always come, the situations, incredible amounts of context that can come from having like a 16 character roster with all these situations to learn.
Sure.
But like I said, the rules in place make it a lot easier. And unlike Crush Counter, because this is the thing they learned, that while it was a good idea, one thing like you mentioned that they learned was that every character, not every character having the same reaction, thus making it so it's like, if Ed lands a stand fierce, he doesn't get anything. Like maybe in the corner, maybe.
Sure.
Or if he, if someone else, if Urian lands a stand fierce, he gets the world. I think they realize, okay, maybe that's too much. Like, okay, well, it's character specific, true, but also it gives them a uniqueness, but it also makes it so that it doesn't feel rewarding for some characters where it does for others, which is not what you want out of a mechanic like that. It's a universal mechanic. It should feel pretty easy to use. And those are, they're always not built the same. Like Focus Attack in 4 was the same way. Not every character Focus Attack built the same. Not every punish counter the same. Whereas now, I think people can get a more universal. I feel like even with a character like, let's say, Guile, who's limited in combos. I've seen some Guile combos in Street Fighter 6. He doesn't look like he's hurting for juice. You know, when
Not
he
at
gets
all.
if he gets the proper frame advantage, he gets some stuff. And
Sure.
every character in the beta at least was like that. So I think that's great, and I think that's what you want. And I think it goes back to keeping that punish counter system and expanding it into the realm of like, well, if the problem was that it was Street Fighter 5 was too reliant on like single hit confirm crouching medium kicks being really strong, let's make it so that if we want a similar thing in 6, that has to come with a certain risk, or a crush counter normal just being thrown out there is too good, like Yuri and Stan Fierce.
Sure.
The risk of it is greater now that you can apply this punish counter and drive rush combination to whiffed attacks.
Yeah, I'm trying to think here. Like, I do want to kind of double back and talk about DPS again with specifically how they cost meters still, right?
Mhm.
Because that did carry over from 5. It's still present in 6, but the difference is that um, because I guess the big issue with it in 5 is that if you DP, you're burning, one of your meters, and your super is actually really valuable as a source of damage. That's why V trigger was so important, is because that would be your alternative to damage if you're using meter on reversals. So it costs a lot, right? But the value of meter in 6 is completely different because it's of its nature being tied to a drive meter that fluctuates with time and with previous decisions, factoring in a lot more. Also, you get it at the start of the round, which is
Yes,
enormous,
you always have it. Yeah.
right? So it seems, because again, with five, the general bit of feedback that people would give is that, you know, when I'm being pressured, it fucking sucks getting pressured in five, right?
Yeah.
And there's no defensive options. That's another really like common piece of feedback, right? And it's
Mhm.
because DP like their process of trying to make DPs more fair made the cost too high for it to actually be valuable enough. Both the opportunity costs with the timing of your meter, as well as the damage that you take if you get hit. Especially
Mhm.
if you are, by getting crush countered, you are giving them their comeback mechanic
Yes,
for
absolutely.
getting baited. So
God forbid if they have V trigger and super, you are done.
right,
It's
right.
over.
So six, I think, fixes a lot of that. I think six makes it so, you know, you have access to it out of the gates, and so you're not waiting to build up meter by blocking. Like, because again, if you have no meter in five and you're blocking, even if you have a reversal, it's like the worst feeling ever, because you're like, I can't do anything about
Can't do
this.
anything. Yep.
Round one start, you know, two people are fighting with each other. There's nothing that you can do if they've got in and have hit medium punch on you over and over again.
Yep.
Um,
You know what was an awesome, I'm thinking about this and I remember back in MK9, one of the awesome things about MK9 that I don't know if it was in 10, it might have been. I really wish they brought it back. Was the first hit got me left full bar meter.
oh
Not a
yeah, there's
full
a
bar,
lot of games that reward that
not a
lately.
full bar, but like they got the first section of it and it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
So it was like whoever got the first hit got to do like an awesome combo and it was like, oh man, you got the first hit, you got to go nuts.
That was 9, right? MK9?
In 9, that was a 9, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It may have been an X, I can't remember, but it was definitely a 9.
That was one of the first times I'd ever heard about that. Then I saw I think it was Persona. Persona gave extra meter as well on first hit, and then Dragon Ball gave Dragon Ball on first hit, if I recall correctly. Um, I forget how we got on that, but either way, first hit. I don't.
Well, it was
I'm
like
kind
it
of
was
glad
in
that.
Street Fighter 5, like the opening round, it was like there was
Oh,
some you when you get pressured, it was like you didn't really have an option out. Now, I happen to think that the Trojan horse of that was like the priority system did a lot of the heavy lifting there to make it feel helpless. Because like
yeah,
if you can sneak in a jab somewhere in pressure, at least that's okay, right? Like you know, we always make fun of the I or at least I always do the Tucson special, but it's true. Like you jab out between like when you're getting up and when you're getting block string. It's just
hmm,
smart. Like it's a good idea. But in five, that was a really dumb idea a lot of times because if someone did medium, you're just screwed.
yeah,
Or they did medium stand fierce, you're screwed. So it was like there wasn't really a good time to find that jab. And then it's like, okay, so I'm gonna wait for the throw. And of course, the risk reward was really bad a lot of times because you go for the throw, you get shimmied, you
hmm,
get hit really bad, with a counter hit or God forbid a punish counter. So yeah, I definitely agree that it felt completely overwhelming. But now you're going to be stocked with your options to start at the beginning of the round, and it will probably feel less bad because the priority system is gone. I think there's a lot of things that from five changed, but you're right that the context of it, you getting the full meter to do invulnerable versus when the start almost brings it back to how it was originally, where you had it, meterless, but now it's just you get the meter, but it's at the start of the round, so you can still do it pretty much anytime you want when the round starts, but there's a cost to it, and I think that
right.
feels a little bit better.
Yeah, and you can use it to, you can, because you have it all kind of laid out in front of you in advance, you can use that to formulate a game plan as well. And so,
Yes.
a lot of that, because another like general piece of feedback for five was lack of expression. Like, because you have that entire drive meter now to use to express yourself a little bit more, you can choose to sacrifice that for a defensive option, which is in itself a form of expression.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
more options is good, I think.
It's yeah, controversial, I know, but yeah, I think you're right. I think another thing from five that has stuck around, or I guess classic five, because it got taken out, but it's kind of back in a way, is like throw loop stuff, and in Street Fighter 6, a lot of characters have a throw loop. They can walk up and do it again.
Yeah.
That was controversial in five. A lot of people were happy when a lot of those got significantly nerfed. I think it only felt bad, like you mentioned, in context with everything being so overwhelming that the addition of throw loops was like, God, I can't. Can I just get, as my friend Slips used to say, can I just do moves? I can't even get my moves. Like I can't throw now loops into like the offense again.
Yes,
But like you said, when it's all balanced out, I think you have a much better reason. Well, yeah, you can do throw loops, and throws got to be good. Like we talked about in a previous episode, throws have to be good in a system like this, or else it's going to feel bad when somebody gets a throw and it throws you full screen and you can't do anything afterwards. Well, now a lot of characters can throw and dash up and probably do something, or some can just walk up and do it again. And I think that's good. I think throws should lead to offense. I don't think they should just be a purely defensive move. Which sometimes in five, that's what it ended up being. Like you did a throw,
that's
great, you
it.
pushed him out, and
Yep.
go back to losing.
Yeah, I think they committed to that angle rather than keeping throw loops in because of
Yeah,
+2. Like every game kind of, in my opinion, has like a magic number. Like +2 is Street Fighter V's
Five
magic
five. Yeah,
number.
yeah, that's
Everyone's
a good way
always
of thinking
+2
about
on
it.
things,
Yeah,
right? In this game, in six, I think the answer, the favorite number is +4, but we can talk about that one
yeah,
a little
yeah.
later. Like it'll come up. It'll come up when we talk about burnout.
I'm sure it will. Yeah, of course. Like in
um,
MK11, it's like if you're like -4 ish or -3, that's like the perfect. That's what you want to be,
mhm.
and because you can do a lot of things from there or have a lot of options. You're not so limited that like, oh, I can only do block afterwards,
Yeah,
right? So it's like you always want to hit. There's a certain pressure place that you can be,
yeah,
and you're right that it was +2, and that's where you could do like jab, duck, jab, and a throw,
yep,
and you couldn't walk out of it. There was a lot
yep.
of characters that had that,
You'd
right?
counter hit them out of the startup of their jab, really. If
Yes,
they
yeah,
So that basically beat everything except for
yeah.
something unintuitive like jump or backdash.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, which is why jumping, like, forward out of stuff became very popular very early.
Hmm.
We saw it a lot, and then what that led to is, like, you'd have characters like early Ryu would just jump out of everything with low kick,
Yep.
and it was like,
It,
"Damn, this is
it,
hard to beat."
it looked extremely silly.
Yeah, it's just the
But
knee, like, the little knee jab thing, yeah.
I actually do think that that's something that's present in six as well. And I'm tempted to. I'm not sure if it's because we still are learning the game, but in the beta at least, because when everyone's learning a new fighting game, they're always jumping more.
Of
Um,
course, yeah.
and so like I try to take this. I'm trying to like take this with a grain of salt here, but like I think jumping out of the corner, because of how oppressive the corner is in Street Fighter 6,
Oh, yeah.
jumping
Oh,
out of the
yeah.
corner, and because of how throw loops work too, jumping just becomes more of a
Appealing.
viable option, yeah, as a
Yeah, it
defensive
might be
option.
your least bad option. Like, because if you get like, let's say someone does the other side DP is really good at that, or they jump back and jump medium punch. Yeah, and you get like a juggle. Yeah, it might be bad, but it's not as bad as like I'm getting throw looped or I'm getting shoved into the corner and I get a full combo because I blocked the drive,
DI,
the
yeah.
DI. Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right in that jumping out becomes an option. But I also think if you've got the corner to the level where I'm trying to do an option that isn't amazing, but it's better than what I have, I think we've got a good corner game. And I think that's good. Like I think the corner needs to be oppressive. I think it needs to be a bad positioning to me is a core component of these games. And while I don't agree with like the black pilled people who are like positioning doesn't matter anymore. We used to learn how to like Sagat's rocks the state. This is the rock on Sagat's Thailand stage. We knew the frames from there. Okay, tough guy. But like I never thought that that was like gone forever. But I do think like when you get a throw tech, you take one throw tech, you go to another state. I think that hurts positioning a little bit. But if now it's like, well, I really don't want to be in the corner. I know I can be anywhere I want, but I won't do that. The meatloaf special, right? Like I don't want to be in the corner. Put baby in the corner. It's bad. Don't do it. And now it's like, okay, if jumping out is my best option, well, yeah, that's going to be annoying because no one likes being jumped out of in pressure. It's the most annoying thing in the world. Like,
Absolutely.
oh my
Yeah.
God, you loser. Like, you just held up.
Yep.
But it's like, okay, but when you're trying to hold up, you're also probably going to get counter hit out of stuff. You're going to get hit, getting with meaty timing, which we're going to learn, everyone, because like you said, people are learning. They're not perfect on that stuff yet. They will
Exactly.
be. Trust
Yeah.
me. Like I said, this is a game for freaks. They're coming. And that's the stuff you're going to be worried about. But like, yeah, I think jumping out of stuff is going to be pretty in vogue. And that in Street Fighter 5, you saw it a lot. But I think that's okay. Like, I think sometimes because I'm used to like I come from MK where that's also a huge complaint is that jumping is too good.
Mhm.
Jump kicks in particular are always like really good. But I think there's always like sometimes you just have to jump because it's like and in MK, like it's really dangerous because if you jump sometimes, if the way people's jab strings work, you can still get juggled by getting hit out of a jump because everything juggles in Mortal Kombat. So it's like that's not necessarily the best option, but it's just the least of all my concerns. I may not just lose my whole life, but I don't know if that's necessarily like oh wow, it's so strong that you can't do anything about it. It's like, well, there's things you can do. And it seems like in 5 or in 6, at least the beta characters, a lot of them have like the old Ryu jump strong where it's like there's a juggle like a medium punch or something that juggles and they can do something out of it. Like Kim has like if she does jump medium
Oh,
punch
like
into
an
the
air,
air
like
throw
an air to air to be a jump out attempt,
to be a
basically.
jump at yeah, and then
Yeah.
like you can get something from it. Not necessarily the best thing in the world, but you get like something more than just oh I jump back. And I think is it counter hit that you fall into a juggle state,
There's a force knockdown state
force
that's
knockdown. Yeah,
so like I know this pretty well because I played Chun, and Chun, when you try to jump out of the corner, um, if you do the wall jump, like Vega's wall jump or
yeah.
Chun's wall jump, right? If you get tagged out of the second hit of it, or after the second jump,
The
you get
after
put
the
in a
wall jump.
float
Yeah,
state essentially,
I see.
which is
Which
also a
from 5.
carryover from 5, but it's
Yes.
also refined in its own way too.
Yeah.
Because with 5, that wasn't initially in the game at all.
No, I think that was very late. I think that was like season 5.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So that's when basically the team that made 6, that's when they got a hold of it.
True, true, yeah. I didn't even
Yeah.
think about that, but yeah, that's a good point. Remember when people they happened to Dalzims, they were like, "Oh yeah, when he's in V skill and he gets hit, he floats," and they're like, "Well, Dalzim's obviously bottom tier now." What fools we
Yep.
were. Yeah.
Yep.
It
Oro
sounds bad
has
on
that.
paper, yeah.
Yeah. Oro, Vega, Chun,
Rashid,
Rashid. Yeah.
yeah.
And
I think you're right that like they tried to like here's some float states like out of moves that are like common to do. Obviously, Chun Li's wall jump isn't like the most extreme defensive threat, but like Rashid, it's a huge thing for him to jump out of the corner and do the wall jump, and he kind of zooms down.
sure.
Vega, his is a little bit better too. So I think they added like Ibuki's like her when she's got the cape and she floats out of the corner. I
Yeah,
think
yeah. So there's
yeah.
also another specific thing worth noting about it is that those force knockdown states only happen in 5. They only happen if you connect with a roundhouse or a strong, I think, of that level. Basically, a jab wouldn't create that
Oh
knockdown.
really? I didn't know that. That's interesting.
So that to me is a sign that they knew that this was different, and they wanted to make somebody really earn it by using a slower button, right? A more specific
Mm.
button. It wasn't just hit
Okay.
any button, and then specifically it was probably because people didn't like jab anti-airs, and that would be annoying. But
Oh
the
yeah,
the
yeah.
real thing I think is they wanted to they wanted to try to play it safe. They knew that this was going to be a really unique and new change, and people were going to react negatively to it, and so they just kind of slowly inched it in and just said, just for these normals. And then in 6 now, that force knockdown is in place, but that can happen off of anything, which is
Yeah.
another general theme of this game, which is like
Yeah, we
just like
just expanded
punish
it to
counters and crush
everything.
counters. Yeah, let's
Yeah,
just give them everything and see how that goes. Um, so yeah, I
which yeah, and is it so it's a force knockdown, is it still only in, like, certain states, like, after a wall jump, or is it, like, if you counter hit, you're in force knockdown?
it's it's when you're in specific states.
Okay, so it's
Um,
still like 5. It's like, okay, this state is every hit is a force knockdown.
yes, yes.
Okay,
So
gotcha,
like
gotcha.
like Kimberly with her forward roundhouse, right? That's a force knockdown move.
Yes,
Um,
yeah.
Chun's forward roundhouse as well. A lot of like airborne moves essentially.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
they like airborne moves that keep you grounded in a way, like little hop kick moves and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And then Chun Li's wall jump as well. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
So yeah, that's and like I said, I think that's like those little ideas are pretty good. Like I think like I even like I'm a 5 hater, but I think even by the end I thought 5 had gotten some pretty crisp new mechanics that were much more thought out, I thought, than some of the initial steps. And I think like you said, it got to be, you know, a smaller team that had more experience and could really dive in and be like, okay, here's what we need.
yeah,
Here's this specific issue. How can we remedy it with what we have? And it was like, there's just little things like that where it's like, maybe some people need some more routes, some interesting combo routes here. This situation is really prevalent. How can we address like here's a way to get around that?
Yep.
So I think that carried over into six. That spirit carried over into six, where it's like if you have a counter to these kind of annoying situations, you will get the maximum reward because it does take like a 5 head level sometimes read to be like, oh, there's a wall jump, got it. And it feels good when it's like, wow, I not only did I hit it, I got the best possible thing I could get out of that.
Yeah,
Uh,
it solves a bunch of different problems, right? Because it like the freedom of expression kind of deal. Well, not freedom, but the freedom to
the
express
First
yourself, right?
Amendment in fighting
Yeah.
games. Yes.
I wonder why that's on my head lately.
Yes.
But
The
like
right to swag.
that's exactly it. Is
It's,
you like you could punish with a really cool combo, but from a practical level, if somebody wasn't punishing with that, it would cause a forced knockdown, and then they would fall, and they would specifically they would hit the ground, and then you would get frame advantage. So you
yes.
could the reward for anti-airing somebody was more than just a button into some damage. It was a button damage knockdown Oki.
Mhm.
Um,
Which is, I think, this new method, I think, is stolen from Street Fighter Cross Tekken, where in every situation that was a
yes.
counter hit, you had the right to Riz. Okay, like it was go time. If you hit a jump button in that game, oh lord, it could be over. It could be
Yep.
Jover if you hit that. Like it was so good.
Oh
And I
man.
think Cross Tekken, I think they brought a lot of like, well, like everything kind of leads to a combo with certain characters. Like if you just get hit by Jin, dude, wrap it up. Like you're never leaving the ground again. And especially if they've got like Bob coming in for the launcher, like, dude, it's over. Like, I'm sorry. You tried your best. Maybe next round. And so that's great. I think Street Fighter Cross Tekken, I think is a great game. Version 2013, of course. I won't speak to the original, but
Right. Right.
I think it was a great, that level of like combo ability for the top characters really felt like, wow, everything really matters. Because now if I whiff a move, they're gonna hit me, they're gonna launch, they're gonna do some crazy damage, and I'm gonna feel like a fool. And it didn't lead to like playing scared. It led to like, wow, we really gotta think about what we're doing here. And you can't. I mean, there were characters that could just derp out stuff, as there always is, but almost every character could also really put the pain on if they partnered their team right, and they could get a huge damage off their universal launch mechanic.
Mhm.
So with Street Fighter Cross Tekken has the universal launcher, Street Fighter 6 has like Drive Rush, which is like everybody's Riz activation, right? Like it's just now we get to do whatever we want. We'll get the best combo possible, and you're going to lose a lot of health, and that's
Yep.
just it, right?
I think that a really noticeable trend in recent fighting games is the power of the low forward. When I say recent fighting games, I mean if you look at the last 3 Street Fighter games, and I'm including Cross Tekken as a Street Fighter game in here because fight
Yeah,
me.
absolutely. I mean, it is. I mean,
Yeah,
it is.
it's a fantastic game as well, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, the the thing that every single one of them, they all started from different points, but they all kind of balanced into low forward burst damage.
Nina's
Um,
low forward is actually like Chernobyl of Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Like it's just like man, that's a meltdown waiting to happen. Like if you get hit by that,
yeah,
it's Spin City, man.
a lot of the best characters in Cross are like that, where like Chun is top 2,
Yeah.
and How Wrong is top 1 in
Yeah.
that game,
How
right?
wrong.
And it's the
Kazuya.
characters, yeah, big
Yeah.
ass normals that convert specifically. And
Mhm.
if you look at 4, Yun is notwithstanding, but Elena was all about that into
Oh,
mallet
absolutely.
smash.
Absolutely.
Evil Ryu was low forward into his loops, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and in 5, the
Rolento.
oh yeah, Rolento was like that too
Mhm.
in both games.
Yeah. In most games he's doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I have a really long move, and then the universal mechanics of the game are going to allow me to convert off of it. And,
Yeah.
and like Cross Tekken is basically that's the entire game, which is
Yeah.
like big poke into boost chain, tag cancel, or special cancel. You had 3 options to convert, and then
Yeah.
in 5, the way they found their way into doing that was V trigger cancel or the hit confirm
One hit
window.
confirm, yeah.
Right. Right. So even 5 eventually got past that hurdle and said, I want to focus on low forward range footsies. And
Yeah.
what's unique about 6 compared to again 4, 5, and Cross is that I guess maybe less so than Cross, but it knows out of the gates that that's what it wants to be, and it's not it's not balancing into it like the other two Street Fighter games did, three Street Fighter games did. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think it does, and I think you're right, and I think they've accounted for that by the 2 things that they did that were different from 5. Number 1, the one hit confirm window is gone.
Right.
For the most part, if you have a low
Right.
forward, it's not one you might be able to do like we saw like with Punk in like the recent exhibition they had at PAX with Luke, you can do like his target combo. That's like easier to hit confirm, but it's you don't get much from it, right? Like I think you get like +1 or something. So it's not like this huge reward.
Sure.
But they don't really have that window. Now what they have is like you drive rush it, which may or may not be confirmable. I'm gonna lean towards no. I'm gonna think that's probably not. You just have to do it.
Oh, that's
And you just
confirmable.
it's confirmable. Okay.
Well, it's confirmable in a different way than what you think, where the frame advantage that it gives you makes it so you can link instead. You don't have to cancel at all when you're
I guess
confirming it.
yeah, that's true. Yeah. In a way,
Right.
like if it hits or blocks, you know what you're gonna do. Yeah.
Right.
But and then it's like, but they also, they obviously thought about it. So like max, scaling starts at what 80% or whatever. From a low forward specifically, because they thought like, okay, well, if this is what's gonna be the game,
Mhm.
which will be very good, we know that we have to do 2 things. Number 1, we have to make it so that this combo isn't always gonna be the best combo in the world. It's gonna be good, but it's gonna be hit by scaling early. So unless you tag a super in the end or something, it's not going to do like the craziest damage in the world. And number 2, as we already talked about, we've now got the punish counter where if you whiff a low forward and they hit you with something, you're going to pay for it, or you have to. There's got to be because I think Street Fighter Five. I think the problem was while they did add the really extended hitboxes on a lot of stuff, which I think
Yep.
was a good idea. I don't know if Five was the first to do it, but it certainly felt like that was where it's like, wow, you can really like you can tag some things really easily. I thought that was a great idea. What I didn't, I think though, there was still some moves like Karian's crouching medium kick is still just amazing. Like it's really hard to hit.
Right.
If you get it, you've really spotted it, but it's like you're probably hyper focusing on it, and that
Yeah.
leads you to do it.
The general rule in 5 is that if someone's whiffing roundhouses against you, then you whiff punish it however the hell you want. If they're whiffing strongs in front of you, you're likely not going to whiff punish it, so you're better off sticking out lights preemptively. And if
Right,
they're
right,
whiffing
right.
jabs, then you also are not going to be able to whiff punish on a reaction, but you can stick crush counters out to blow that up.
Okay, so like a basic kind of triangle thing of
Mm-hmm.
reading what you got. Yeah. So
Yeah, because then your
like
crush counter comes out, and you start swinging. You start swinging with the big buttons, and then they whiff punish you.
right, right, yes, yeah.
So
It leads all
it's more
back.
that like the rock paper scissors drives you towards the buttons that are whiff punishable versus making every button whiff punishable. If that
Yes,
makes
yeah, that
sense.
makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that does. And like I said, I think Five I think they like that idea, like that you just described right there. I think that's like the basic meta at the moment. And I think
Mhm.
they like the team likes it, but my guess is for 6, they just felt like maybe we tune this up a little bit. Like we take away the priority system so it doesn't feel like you have to only counter rock with rock and paper with paper. And let's also make it so that it's more rewarding for every character if they manage to tag it. And which I think is a great idea because I don't hate the idea of 5 like boiling down to that. What I didn't like about 5 was like, every character's medium for the most part was like the same. Every
Yeah.
sweep was like the same level. Now in 6, you can see they've played with that a little bit, but they kind of, the way they got around that was like, okay, you can get that same frame advantage from like a medium, but it's got to be from like drive rush.
Right.
Right. So drive rush is a way to get back to like Street Fighter 5 levels of combo ability and frame advantage and stuff. But it costs something and you can see it coming. If someone's just doing it at you, you'll
Mhm.
probably be able to counter it. You got to be a little bit smarter about it. You can't just run up and mash medium and then like it's like medium, I get it, and you can't do anything about it. You got to backdash or whatever.
Yeah.
They've
Yeah.
tied it to like a mechanic, right? Yeah.
It's that the weapon triangle, right, is like, this is like Machabo article stuff where like
Mhm.
a poke, a poke will
Lord
lose.
Machabo, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
A poke will lose to a whiff punish. A whiff punish will lose to an advancing move, and then an advancing move will lose to a poke. Like
Poke.
that's kind of the rotating thing right there. And in 5, the answer to a lot of people looking to whiff punish is to dash, because dashes were so fast in that game.
It was like 16. Yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
characters had like 16 frames. Yeah.
and in 6, the first thing that you notice is that the dashes aren't nearly as fast. They feel more like cross Tekken dashes, if anything. There's
Yeah. A
little bit
little
of
more.
like weight
Yeah.
to them, right?
Some of
But
them are good, but like they're sluggish. They're not going to be the super huge momentum carrying. Yeah.
right. So, but the cool thing is that drive rush is also weirdly hard to react to because you're already looking for drive impact, you're looking for pokes and all this other stuff, and the big like jerk from the screen freeze and
Explosion of
the
color.
explosion of color, right?
Yeah.
So that that spirit of the Street Fighter 5, I'm going to dash in and hit strong on you, it's still there specifically with the drive rush. I think those are interchangeable. When I played the beta in last December, I was like, you know, the time that I would want to dash in Street Fighter 5, what if I parry rush instead? And it seemed to work really well. There's a lot of like unique things about the dash that that are good as far as like keeping the game from being too boring. The principle of an advancing normal is that it's an advancing move is that it's going to end neutral, right? And then we're going to get into like the slugfest and the exciting parts for a lot of spectators. But in 5, it was so powerful, and that was part of the feeling that people had with Unga and being like, this guy's just dashing up and hitting strong on me over and over and over again.
About it, yeah.
Right? And then when they dash up and hit strong, they're +2. That's that magic number we were talking about, and it's shitty, especially if it's round 1 start.
It loops back into the best offense you could want. Like it sucks, right? Now you're right. And with 6, they thought about like, okay, well, at least it costs meter. At least it, and like you said, I think like drive rush into throw or drive rush into nothing will eventually be a big part of the game. You know, you spent a little bit, but now you're in. You just do what you wanted to do. And it is like 5 in a way, but it's not just I can do this on you, and there's 8 frames of lag, so I can't really react to it as well.
Yeah.
Or if you're in burnout now, you can't just do that. So like a character of someone might get really overzealous and make these huge 5-head reads on you, and you're like, oh my god, I'm dead. But then they got burned out, and now it's like, well, then now they can't do that stuff.
Yep.
So I think they decided there needs to be a way that we can reenact the same scenario, but it doesn't feel as oppressive at the start of the round. Yeah, it's like shit. It doesn't feel as bad at the start of the round, and we can really only simulate it like fully in the corner, and you're in burnout. Now we're playing Street Fighter 5 again.
Yep.
And everything feels shitty.
Yep.
But the shitty part is like a big glowing meter that's
a good point, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, because you're gonna do mediums and they're gonna be +4, and you're like, I can't do anything. Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, you feel like a rock when you're in burnout.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they just recreated Street Fighter 5, but they made the pass to it not immediately available from the round start, which I think is great. I think it's a great idea.
I think specifically with the dash, you attach a cost to it, which it's a function of your game plan, and it impacts you later on down the line. Versus in 5, your dash doesn't really impact you later on down the line.
No, not at all. Yeah, you can just keep doing it. In fact, as we see now, Ed can in fact just keep doing it.
Yeah, and again though, the problem though is that if you don't have good dashes, like in Cross Tekken, then you don't have, that's one less way to end neutral, and then you get the Cross Tekken problem, which is it's too boring, it's too slow, it's only footsies.
Yeah.
And so,
well, Cross Tekken also it Trojan horsed that in with like the really bad regeneration in the first version of the game,
right?
Or the too fast regeneration. So the timeouts were constant. Or if you watch like, I don't think it was called Capcom Cup back then, but it was like the 25th anniversary tournament or whatever.
Yes.
And Tokido's playing Dalsum and Cody, and it's just horse shit.
Yeah.
Like he's
Infiltration
just
is running with Relento the whole time that championship too.
Jack Cross just doing his DP a million times because it's safe. Like it's just like that's just boring, right? But and I think the problem with Cross Tekken I always felt was like you had the supercharged top characters that felt awesome. And then it was like, okay, that like you had unique characters like Brian, who was kind of cool, but he had like more built-in weaknesses. But then it was like you got to some characters like, let's say Paul. Paul had his place, right? Like he was a good tag-in character. He could do a lot of damage if he tagged in, tagged back out.
Right.
But he was so slow, and he didn't have a safe move to do off his low forward. So it's like even in footsies, he couldn't really scare you that bad. And he moved, and Heihachi's the same way. Heihachi had a lot of scary stuff, but damn, he's slow. He can't there's just no game to play when the stages are so long and a lot of characters are so slow. I feel like 5 and 6, that was a complaint in 4 a lot too. People would talk about walk speed. I think in general, the one thing you haven't heard about 6 is like, wow, everyone feels slow walking. They've kind of gotten it to his place where it's not as fast as it might have been in the past, but it feels okay. Like, there's some characters obviously that move a little bit slower, but like Jury in 4 was super slow. Then in Cross Tekken, she was like maybe a little too fast. Now they've got like a nice balance in 5 and 6, where it's like she walks fast, but she has slower normals, so it kind of balances out in the end. I think
Yeah,
they've thought about that a little bit more. Kim, I think, walks back pretty fast.
I think Cross had the extra burden of being a team game, and so at the risk of sounding too prescriptive for Cross, like I felt like the ideal team is point character with a really strong walk speed, like usually a Street Fighter character, and then Tekken anchor, where their offense high low game is so offensive that they don't like their weakness has to be their mobility, because they're once they're in your ass, you're dead. Like you're eating a Heihachi overhead, right? Um, so
The
I
dozens of
basically
Cross Tekken players are very mad at you for that prescriptive take, by the way. The
right,
dozens.
right. I'm just,
Yeah,
like again, there's freedom of expression. You can play who you want there, but
yeah.
I think a lot of the powerful
Generally
teams,
true. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
you want to have good walk speed into burst damage, and you want to find a team that would create that. And I think that five had that as well. By like again, you can't look at each character in a vacuum. You have to look at a team,
Yeah.
and then compare that to a Street Fighter Five or a Street Fighter Four character. Um, and by and large, I think the fast characters that with good walk speed had the good confirmable low forwards in five. I forget where I'm going with this. Oh yeah. I was talking about reaction speed, because the big difference that I've noticed with 6 and 5 is that it'll take the spirit of 5 as far as like that whiff punishability, the idea of checking a dash. The idea of checking a dash is with you plant yourself down and you jab in Street Fighter 5,
Right. Right.
right? But the problem is that was dependent on your reactions. The low forward confirms that was dependent on your reactions,
True.
and
True.
that's just really hard to balance around, because then you're dealing with people some people are innately able to do that because they have the reactions, and some
Yeah,
people
there will
are
be more
innately not.
talented people. Like you could teach yourself to do it, but there's going to be people who can do it no problem, and people who will struggle with it their entire life.
That's different than playing the poker game, which is
Yes.
like where I'm playing a battle of wits with somebody else. And so what I think Six did is took the spirit of that stuff and then took the reaction time requirement out of it. So again,
Yeah.
with Drive Rush, you can check it because the screen freezes. It takes some getting used to, I think, but the screen freezes and flashes, so they to tell you, hey, you should punish this, or hey, a mix-up's coming. And then the confirmable low forwards it's locked behind Drive Rush and a cost. Same deal. It's less so about reactions and more so about meter management. That they basically subbed those requirements
Yeah,
out.
which they're more up here and less about like the ability in your your reactions and things like that. And
Right.
I think 5 gets the guff of being like super simple. And I think it is in some
Yeah.
ways, but I do also think at a high level, it asks a lot of anybody to really like commit to.
Yep.
And that can be very taxing. And I think that's why you see people who have such, I don't want to say bitterness, but that's kind of like the feeling, right? Like they don't feel
It's a feeling of
uh,
being excluded.
mirthful, right? Like they feel like, oh, I can finally stop playing 5. It exhausts me to
Yeah.
play because it's just like I have to think so much and I have to use my reaction, and I have to learn how to do this and that, and I really have to be on the point with my reactions to stop stuff. And not that any fighting game at a high level isn't full of that. It can be exhausting, but you also don't feel like, man, if I'm off slightly today, I won't be able to do anything.
Mm.
Whereas like with 5, if you're off, like, oh man, I can't hit my hit confirms or whatever, that's really bad. Like if you're playing Kareen and you miss that just frame, not only the
Just
one
from
hit confirm,
Tenko,
but the
yeah.
just frame Tanko, you're like, man, that I'm losing a lot just based on that,
Yep.
just on that. And it's like that is stressful. And I don't think you want that to be how people perceive your game. As
It's
stressful,
unique
uniquely
because
stressful. Yeah.
yeah, because the stress mechanic, like it's not mechanic, but the
The
idea
mechanic,
of
yes.
feeling stress around a game is specifically, I originally thought of it as tied to mechanics. It was the more universal mechanics there are in the game, the more there are things to worry about, and because of that, I'm going to be more stressed. And then Strive comes out, or Exert even comes out before that, and it's like, here's a game with loads of universal mechanics, and the players don't feel stressed when they play. If anything, they feel empowered to utilize all those mechanics. And I think that that's where 6 diverges from 5 as well, where 5 was like, here's a very, very small amount of universal mechanics that are useful and helpful, and here's more varied. Like the V in V trigger stands for variable. It's
Yeah.
it's by design. This is going to be
Yeah,
different for a lot of people.
Including your fun is variable depending on the
That's
V trigger.
fair.
Yeah, which that's kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
shitty, right? Like
yeah.
you don't want that.
That V trigger is your tier list placing.
Yeah,
There's a direct
exactly.
correlation, right?
And you didn't like in 4, it was that was kind of a similar issue where it was like who can combo into ultra. That was
Yes.
the first go around. It was like who can do that, and
Hmm.
if you are, you're amazing, and if you can't, like if you're Guile or whatever, it's like that kind of sucks. Your ultra's basically not worth using. And that, that feels bad. You don't ever want that to be the case. And as the game bore out, there was more characters who could do that, or it was like the how much damage it did got toned down a little bit, so it didn't feel as oppressive.
Sure.
I think what you don't want is the universal mechanics now. Okay, who does it better? That's the common complaint, right? Like when the mechanics are universal, it just becomes who's better by technicality, right?
It homogenizes the game a lot, right?
Homogenizes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's like and that's a common like complaint of like King of Fighters. I don't think that sticks as much. I think there's a lot more that goes into it. But sometimes like you watch King of Fighters, and if you have like a basic a really basic conception, it just feels like the characters who seem to be the best are the ones that do something into EX cancel, and they can do the rush in and do a big combo, and who does that better. And it's like it doesn't really matter who the character is, it just matters who does it the best. Where obviously there's way more to it than that, but that's what it feels like or seems like when you're just watching it, and you're
Hmm.
like, well, and like you said, it's like, okay, now who has the best low forward and who has the best combo from it. That's a big factor in who's really good in the game.
Right.
As we see, Karin's still really good. Cammy's still really good. Ed now is really good because he's got a safe move that he can do off his low forward. Even though it's
Yep.
not the most damaging in the world, it obviously makes him very strong. Luke can do the
Luke's is
same
good.
thing.
Yep.
Yep, Luke can do it too. So that is obviously played into who's the best characters.
Hmm.
And then it feels like you said, the mechanics now determine who's the best, not like the expression-ish aspect of it, which we now have lessened because of 6 deciding to lock a lot of that behind smart usage of a meter, which takes now brains to think about more than just kind of I can just do it whenever.
I will say though, and this is like obligatory for any time we talk about 6, but like I'm basing my knowledge off of the beta, and
Yes,
why this matters, because it's not like this grand conspiracy theory that things are going to change, but specifically the 8 characters that are in the beta are all like low forward characters.
That's true too. Yeah.
Like some of them don't have cancelable low forwards, but they still like are.
Guile's a low forward character. Come on, like that move
Fireball
is insane.
DP. Yeah. Fireball DP and a mid range use low forward, right? Like a lot of those characters fall into that category.
+4 on hit low forward. Like Jesus. Like, come on, guys.
So we might have a situation when these grapplers come out or these other characters come out where it's like our my opinion, my theory on low forward into burst damage being the meta of the game, for these 8 right now that are that were in the beta build, like those are the that is the meta, but maybe low forward won't be the thing. I could just say though, like looking at the way they chose to balance 5 and the way they chose to balance 4 and the way they made 2013 cross, it seems like that's the direction they want to go, is
right.
Coupled with the intent. They like, again, you mentioned earlier that low forwards have 80% scaling, right? There's a lot of questions that I have about that, on like, what came first? Was the low forward scaling in reaction to everybody walking backwards because everything's negative? Or is it a reaction more towards we think low forward drive rush is going to be a thing because we've deliberately made it so you can't confirm off of lows?
Mm.
Like there's a lot of like that's the interesting thing about this is we know intent and we know patterns from past games, but we don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah, which makes
that.
it fun to speculate in a way. And like you talked about when you've talked about being like mechanically interested, I think that kind of stuff is interesting to talk about, because it's like there is, because like I said, we all assume that like a lot of people assume the devs are like drooling idiots, and like the players kind of make the most out of like what these morons with monkeys with typewriters put together. But that's not really the case. A lot of these guys are actually pretty hip. They know what they're doing.
More importantly, they know a lot of things about the games that we don't care about from a competitive angle, like
100%,
like hit stop. Like we don't. That's not in a frame data grid anywhere. Hit stop for like in frames per second or anything like that. But for an actual developer, that matters a lot to how the game feels.
Functions, yeah, or feels, yeah, exactly. Or little things like obviously they were like, we can't have the huge what's it called, proximity guard, because in six it would feel bad if you were trying to block something or you're trying to parry, and then you would get in proximity block, and you can't do that anymore. So it's very lessened now because they thought about, which is a very nerdy thing. Like no one thinks about like proximity block unless it's like a Street Fighter 4 unblockable from like 2010. But it was they cared about that enough to really make that change, and I think that speaks to, like you said, where it's more intense. And while you would speculate about the intent, I think it's interesting how it plays out. Where you see, like, you've already noticed this pattern between the past three games.
Mhm.
There's a history there. It's not just, well, we played this game until we played the next game, and they're all different, and who cares? It's like, well, five, you may not like it, like I certainly didn't, but I can recognize that they like some things from five. They liked how it turned out in a broad sense, but they just wanted to fine tweak some of the situations, how quick you got into them, how fast you got out of them, how much was
Yeah.
reaction based, how much was based on the player not feeling great that day. They just wanted it to be more universal, but also keep those same punishing situations, all based around, like you said, an explosive mid range. Because we're not going back to the days of like super fast ST where the reactions, all the interactions are micro interactions that lead to like this kind of explosion of something happening really fast, 10-second rounds or whatever. We're not going back to that ever, but we can get close. We can have the really big momentum shifts from mid range pokes that are being used. That's what they want. Clearly, that to a lot of these different dev teams, that's what Street Fighter seems to be about. And how can we fine tune that to where it doesn't feel like shit in Street Fighter 5, and how we can make it feel better in 6 to start with, and what didn't we like in 4? What are some other weird games we did like Cross Tekken where there's some good ideas, but there's a lot of also like not very good ideas that we should throw away? It's very interesting. It's all interesting to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and like we have like another thing I wanted to talk to you about, and maybe we can save this for another episode, is
Sure.
the,
Yeah.
the wake up system,
Oh
because
yeah.
that's yet another example of the differences, like lessons learned from five and applied to six.
Yeah, Ancestors in 5, that like there is some fine tuning though that has really made a huge difference. But that would be a very long discussion.
Yeah,
And we've already hit
absolutely.
the hour mark, so I think we need to think about that
Very
one.
cool.
Yeah.
Yep. So for all you listening, thank you very much for liking and subscribing. You can find us on twitch.tv/spiral series, youtube.com/spiral series, and on Spotify under Absolute Guard. This is Absolute Extra number 3. Thanks very much, Tanner, for being on.
No problem. I think it's a blast every time.